What's happening? Liz Truss back as Chancellor. What's going on? Boris Johnson, maybe party chair. What's happening? You couldn't really have written this the day before. This is extraordinary.
Hi, Ian. As you said, absolutely extraordinary day here in Downing Street and in government. And it's sort of really been a reshuffle by two halves, hasn't it? We saw that extraordinary appointment of David Cameron earlier on today. And now what we're seeing is the new faces come into government, the likes of Laura Trott, Victoria Atkins, Richard Holden, the sort of rising stars of the party as Rishi Sunak looks to put forward his top team before the next election. And obviously we need to talk about Suella Braverman, which seems a lifetime ago. You know, only this morning she was Home Secretary, and then being unceremoniously dumped by Rishi Sunak following that explosive Times article last week and the dramatic fallout from that. And so what I think now is Rishi Sunak really trying to put together his top team before the next election. We think it's going to be in less than 12 months' time. In terms of David Cameron, obviously, he seems to be capturing all of the headlines today. This is going to be a really, really divisive appointment because, on the one hand, people are saying he's got a wealth of experience. He's obviously had 7 years out, but he was Prime Minister for 6 years and leader of his party for 5 years before that. But obviously, you know, a lot of Tory MPs are going to be incredibly angry about this because he was the one who called that Brexit referendum, advocated for Remain, and as many people see it, stoked a massive Project Fear during that campaign in which he said that Brexit would be an unmitigated disaster. And as Foreign Secretary, he's now going to have to be out selling global Britain on the world stage.
I mean, that in itself is an extraordinary position to be in, and that's true. He's got to extol the virtues and the brilliance of Brexit. Now he's in that position. I think, Jack, what is maybe a bit confusing for a lot of people looking at this, if you look at Rishi Sunak's previous cabinet half an hour ago, the likes of Suella Braverman, even if you didn't like Suella Braverman, you kind of see why she was there. Similarly with Kemi Badenoch, etc. People whose politics were in a different place to somebody like Jeremy Hunt, for example. So you could understand why Lee Anderson in his sort of deputy chair position, etc. All of those things, they made some sense. I'm looking at this and I can't work out what the heck is going on, Jack. I'm not sure what the ideological reasoning is behind this. What's the philosophy behind this reshuffle? What's it meant to represent?
Well, that's right. And like you said, in a cabinet, often what you want to do is create quite a broad church and you want to sort of balance out different personalities. And so we know that Rishi Sunak is quite mild-mannered. He speaks to sort of almost sort of the centrist wing of the Conservative Party. Now, Suella Braverman, for a lot of people, was his outrider. She was the one that appealed to those red wall seats who are going to be crucial at the next election. They were obviously crucial to Boris Johnson's victory in 2019. However, what we're hearing out of Number 10 today is that they want a united front heading into the next election. We know that voters don't vote for divided parties. And time after time again, it seemed that Suella Braverman was a bit of a thorn in the side of the Prime Minister. And so I think what we're seeing at the moment is, yes, potentially he's going to anger a few people on the Tory right and maybe acolytes of Suella Braverman. He's obviously making a calculated risk that she was just a bit too much of a troublemaker to keep in the ranks. And, you know, in the coming hours and days, I think that we're really going to see the extent of whether that calculation pays off or not.
What about these other appointments then, Jack? I mean, is there any significance to any of these? Are these all sort of fairly mediocre players in the world of politics? We have Laura Trott joining the cabinet. We have Therese Coffey leaving the cabinet, or was she pushed? I don't know. Either way, are these brilliant new minds likely to shake it up to the point that Rishi Sunak feels and senses that he's far more confident to go into the next election? What do we know about these other names?
Yes, we have three names, essentially, who have been parachuted into cabinet jobs. Now, TalkTV viewers might not have heard of Richard Holden or Victoria Atkins or Laura Trott. However, they've been creating a bit of a buzz around Westminster for some time now. They've been seen as on the ascendancy and the future of the Conservative Party. The problem is, for Rishi Sunak, is that, especially with Laura Trott and Richard Holden, they aren't just, 2019ers who have come from the Red Wall and speak to a wider Britain, but actually both of them are previous special advisors in government. So now Rishi Sunak's getting a bit of flack as saying, actually, you're sort of just looking after the establishment, really, and you're promoting people who have been around Westminster for ages and all sort of have a similar outlook on life. Now, on the other hand, people say that actually having that experience is obviously great. David Cameron himself, former special advisor in the John Major years. What you're seeing, I think, is a clear out of people who have been at the top of government for a long time, probably don't offer anything exciting new to the voters, and you're sort of seeing fresh faces being brought in to spice government up a bit ahead of that election next year.
One of the questions we're asking, or the question, Jack, we're asking here this afternoon on TalkTV is really centred around Suella Braverman. I mean, the Cameron story absolutely hoovers up a lot of the headlines. A former Prime Minister coming back to one of the most senior positions in government. We've rarely, if at all, seen anything like that. But the Braverman sacking is massively important here, isn't it? Because what we're looking at is very much a sort of two-party Conservative setup now, because she's going to be singing from the right. Rishi Sunak will argue he's in the middle. She's clearly vying for the big job post the next election, assuming the Tories are kicked out of office, which is what the bookmakers tell us is likely to happen. Is that going to provide a narrative, do you think, Jack, right up to the next election? Because the Tories love a scrap. And they don't care who knows it. They don't do this stuff in private. They're quite happy to stand on the green benches dissing their own, even if it means electoral failure. And you can almost see this coming round the tracks with Suella Braverman now. This is a divided party. She's heading up one side and Rishi Sunak the other.
Yeah, and like you said, if you think that Suella Braverman was a troublemaker when she was inside the cabinet, you can bet your life on the fact that she's going to make Rishi Sunak's life a living hell on the backbenches. I think there's an interesting point here, though, is that a lot of the time when cabinet ministers leave the government and they go onto the backbenches, they don't command the same gravitas as they did when they were inside the tent. You know, no disrespect to Priti Patel, but she was really in the mix as potentially a future leader when she was in government. And now, her interventions aren't as powerful as potentially they once were when she was Home Secretary. And so while I think that Suella Braverman is definitely going to continue to capture the headlines, you have to be careful when you do leave government that actually you don't just be seen as a sort of as someone quite embittered and someone who is just sort of criticising because you've been kicked out. And I think that's going to be Suella Braverman's challenge now. Obviously, she's going to have a lot to say. She's already sort of teased it and says that she's going to have more to say in the coming days. And I think that is going to send shockwaves, whatever she says.